Okay, welcome to video 2 for assembly. With this one, we're going to start with the book. So the feature tree with an assembly is going to look a little bit different than when we model a part. And the first thing we want to look at is when we bring different parts in, or our parts in general, they're controlled by 6 degrees of freedom. And what that means are 6 types of movement. And if we look at our triad over here, if we look at the red, green, and blue, they can each move in 2 directions, right? Forward and back. So that's 3 degrees, one for each one for each axis. And then around each axis, we can also rotate around or about each axis. And so that's 3 more degrees. So we always have 6 degrees of freedom for every part that we bring in. And so how that component that we bring into an assembly is allowed to move depends on its degrees of freedom. And we're able to control that by either using the fix or insert mate options, and we're able to control that for each component. All right, so if we look at the feature tree, we've got, and this is an example of what we've got, what we're going to have is we've got the name of the assembly up here, and then underneath the assembly, it's got its own degree of commands underneath it. And then where we inserted the bracket, if we open up that bracket using this arrow, it also has its own set of history, materials and whatnot associated with just that part. And that's what you're going to see as we keep moving down the feature tree. Every component that we insert into this assembly is going to have the same thing. It's going to have its own independent set of parameters that are assigned to that part component, and then all the part components are part of the part assembly. And so for each part component that we insert into an assembly, we're able to edit that part if we need to, either in the context of the assembly, or we can edit it as its own individual part. So if we scroll down here and we look at this top line, which is the same here as this bracket, we have there's some information that's displayed in this line. And so we have an F here that tells us that that's the state of the component, that in this case it's fixed, but that's our first component. It gives us the file name. It gives us an instance number. And what the instance number is I can insert the same part into an assembly multiple times. And so maybe I'm creating an assembly and I have 8 bolts that are half 13. For every bolt, it needs its own instance. So in that case, 1 through 8, to distinguish it from the other ones. But it's we made that same part component, and that's one of the nice things about assemblies is we can reuse parts. We don't have to recreate every single part over and over again. So we've got configuration. If there is one, if we are using different configurations, it will tell us which one we are using, and then it will tell us the display state. Now, display state is talked about more in a higher level assembly class that we're not going to go into, but basically what it means here is that the display state of the part itself is the same as the display state of this part component in the assembly. On page 445, you can go over and you can read more if you want to know more about what's in that first line there. So when we create and it kind of explains it here as well, but when we create an assembly, it basically creates a parent document. And what I mean by that is when we create these individual components, it's creating a document for each individual component. And when we drag those components into an assembly, there's a pathway that's created. So when we open an assembly, it can go find each individual component that it needs to create that assembly when we open it. So if we haven't used an assembly in quite a while, and maybe we open a part and we rename it or we move it, when I go back to open that assembly, I may get a warning that says part component not found do I wish to search for it? And that's because we've broken the pathway, because if we changed it, like a rename or something. And once I go back and I find that part and I reestablish that pathway or that connection, that parent document of the assembly will resave that and reestablish that pathway. So then when I open up the assembly again, all the components will come into it. But so that's one thing to be mindful of as well, is that those pathways need to be there. And so sometimes when we open up an assembly, um, the parts might not be there. And that's why I had you download that zip folder onto your desktop, because we might be able to open one, but if it can't find, once we create the assembly, if it can't find all those components, then you're going to get that error message. So it explains it a little bit on page 446, but we also want to be careful with file names, and we want to make sure that we use unique file names for our assemblies and our part documents, or our part components. It gives an example of bracket, and maybe we have two different parts called bracket. And so that means when we open a document, a parent document, which is our assembly, and it's searching for all the components that go into that parent document, it doesn't know what bracket we mean. And so what it's going to do is it's going to find that first it's going to use the first bracket that it finds. And that may or may not be the wrong one or the right one. And so we need to be mindful about that. I generally don't like to do this, but if we have to, we can rename things in the assembly. But in order to do that, I need to come up here to Systems, and under Feature Manager, I need to make sure that I have something checked that says allow component files to be renamed from feature tree. So I would need to have that checked in order for me to be able to rename things in the tree. So in assembly, we have a rollback bar that works the same way that it did when we were using it for a part file. And then what will happen is when we create an assembly, we also have what we call a mates folder. And once we create mates, where we attach one part to another, this is where they get solved. And it's going to solve it in order. And that's so if there's a conflict when we're mating parts together, we can go in and hopefully quickly troubleshoot, find where the problem is, and fix it if we need to. Okay, we're going to stop this video here, and we're going to pick up on the next one with actually inserting in our first part to mate with this bracket.